What was Chicago like growing up?
There were two Chicagos. One Chicago was the South Side, which I couldn't stand. The other Chicago was the subways and the downtown and the Christmas windows, the museums. That was Chicago #2, which I loved, you know. But I know when I was a boy, I asked my parents, I said, why can't we live down here in the tall buildings, you know? That really caught my eye, you know. But I was too young to understand, no, we can't live down here, you know. But that was Chicago #2, which I really liked, you know. And at Christmas time, either my father or my mother would take us down to look in the windows and the animated figures in the Christmas windows. And then there were, I think it was on the 8th floor of the Sears building. There was a train, you could get into a train and ride all around every year until we were too old to ride the train. And finally one Christmas, went down, my parents took me down there, ride the train. You're too old to ride the train now. Oh, that broke my heart. But then I realized, yeah, I was too old. I was getting too old to ride the train. The train was for the kids. I wasn't a kid anymore. So anyway, but at least I did enjoy downtown Chicago. That was Chicago #2. Chicago #1 I never liked. Never liked Chicago #1. It's the South Side, never did like it. Still don't like it. By the time I moved to Hinsdale, I had very little to do with it, Chicago. Very little to do with it. The only, matter of fact, the only time that I would go to Chicago was to see my parents, that's all. No other time was I there in Chicago, because I just wasn't interested in the city. But whenever I went, it was just to see my parents, and that was it.
Do you remember the house and where they lived?
I remember the house. I remember 4953, and I remember there on Vincent's. I remember the house, 619 Woodland Park, which was closer to downtown, which was much better. It wasn't there in that ghetto where we were born, grew up. And when we left 619 Woodland Park and moved to Michigan, I really missed 619. But of course, I still wanted to live in Michigan. I missed Chicago a little bit when we moved to 619, but I really liked Woodland Park. So the house there was a 3-story house, and of course by the time I lived there, but while I lived there, I got married and moved away.
Tell us about your time with the American Legion.
This cap that I wear, matter of fact, it's partly American Legion and it's partly items that I was awarded while I was in the military. I joined the Hinsdale American Legion. I was made commander of the parade department, the color guards they were, and I was in charge of them. Matter of fact, I was the only person of color in the Hinsdale American Legion. And I wound up being the commander for the color guard. Later on, I was commander of the whole troop. And as time went on, I moved to I left Hinsdale and moved to Romeoville, Illinois. And while living in Romeoville, I was going back and forth between Romeoville and Hinsdale. So anyway, I decided that I had enough of being a parade commander, and I thought it was time for me to step down. And so I asked the officials in Hinsdale, American Legion, to relieve me from duty. For several years, they drug their feet and, yeah, we'll find you a replacement, rah, rah, rah. They never found a replacement until COVID-19 came along. And I definitely told them, I said, I'm not coming to Hinsdale to lead the parade. They understood. And so that's how I was able to get out of leading the parade in Hinsdale.
Do you have any memories of W.D. Forde?
Not too much. I remember when I knew that I was going to be drafted. I did not want to be drafted from Illinois. So I asked my father if I could call my grandfather, who was pastoring in Detroit, and ask him if I could use his address to go to the military from. And so my father says, well, you living in Illinois. I said, well, if I can use my grandfather's address, I said, I'll go from Michigan. And so he said, well, just hold on. I had no idea that my parents were trying to buy property in Michigan at that time. And about 6 or 7 months later, we were living in Michigan. And the first thing I did was contact my grandfather and ask him if I could use his address since I lived in Michigan by that time. He says, oh yeah, okay, all right, Erwin, sure you can. So I registered in Michigan, and I had already registered in Illinois, but I didn't want to go to the military from Illinois. And the good Lord made sure that everything was worked out so that I could register in Michigan and go to the military from Michigan. And that's what happened. And I was drafted from the state of Michigan. And I guess about a year later, I was in Europe, and Illinois was looking for me. And so I think it was my mother told him, says, oh, he's in the military, he's over in Europe. And so she gave them all the information of my being in the military in Michigan, and so they looked that up and found out that she was telling them the truth, and so they stopped looking for me. Of course, there was nothing they could do about it. I was in the Army, so. But as long as that's what had happened, then Illinois just stopped looking for me. Mother told me all of that. That's the only reason why I knew it.
Tell us a little bit about our cousins, Danny and Carla.
Dan was born in 1957, and we sent him to church school, Shiloh, to begin with. And then when we moved to Hinsdale, we put him in the Hinsdale Adventist School. Carla was born in 1960, same with her. But Dan, when we moved to Hinsdale, we sent Dan to Oakwood College, which is Oakwood University now. And since we only lived 50 miles from Andrews, we sent Carla to Andrews. And so both of the children received their degrees. Dan was a business major. Carla was a major in health education. And so they both now live in Aurora, Illinois. And as close as they live, they hardly ever see each other. But Dan has 2 boys now, and Carla has a daughter that's graduating that has graduated from high school. So they're growing up so fast I can hardly keep up with them. So anyway, whenever I see friends of mine that I haven't seen in a few weeks or months, especially months, they said, "How are the Fords?" I say, "The Fords are still running."
So tell us a little bit about your travels over the years.
Well, we after we got married, we took I think it was 2 or 3 trips. One was to Egypt, Israel, and one was to Russia. Matter of fact, we were met by Anna, the Russian guide, and we were on a overnight train out of St. Petersburg into downtown Moscow that morning, and we were met with a tour bus, and Anna took us around, and matter of fact, they took us to a marketplace on Arbart Street, and they told us that now tomorrow you'll be on your own. You want to visit the marketplace on Arbart Street, fine, you know. And well, Ross and I took off on our own, and they said if you want to keep the hotel, if you don't want to get lost, remember the hotel has a big steeple. All you have to do is look back and see the steeple, and that's your hotel. Well, we were walking and walking, and finally he said, "Well, where is Arbart Street?" Down the street comes this young lady, and I told Robin, I said, "I'm going to ask this young lady, if she can speak English." So I walked up to her, I said, "Excuse me, do you speak English?" She says, "Yes, I speak English." Spoke English better than some Americans. And so I found out that English is required in their schools because it's considered an international language, and most Russians can speak English, you know. And so we found Arbart Street and did a little shopping there in Arbart Street. And also I wanted to go into the Kremlin, and there was a guard there in the steps of the Kremlin, and he had a weapon on him, but he didn't hold it up. He just had it on his shoulder. And so I had my camera. So I walked up to him. I said, "You speak English, sir?" He says, "Yes, I speak English." I said, "Can I take pictures when I go into the Kremlin?" He says, "You can take all the pictures you want." And so we went inside the Kremlin. It's just like a city in itself. There was a church and this and that, and the soldiers putting on a parade and this and that. Had a good time inside the Kremlin. The pictures of some of the Russian leaders were in there. And I said, I never thought that I would ever go inside the Russian Kremlin, you know, but there we were. What do I remember about the move to Arizona? Oh, we were on a prison ministry tour. We came out here, and somebody had told Rosalind, while you're in Arizona, if you go to this place called Sun City Grand, you're not going to ever want to go back to Chicago, you know. And so that's how we found how we knew about Sun City Grand. And when we got here, I told Rosalind, I said, "That lady, whoever told you about Sun City Grand was right." I said, "I never want to go back to Chicago." But it was an experience.
You like the terrain?
Mm-hmm.
You like the terrain?
The terrain, I always loved the terrain. I always loved mountains, you know, and the desert. I always loved that. I never did like the only thing I liked about was where we lived on the farm. It was just plain, you know, that I liked. But as far as mountains and desert and this and that, that was always number one in my mind. So when we finally decided to move to Arizona, I knew God was behind that, you know. So at least I tell people, I said, at least I had sense enough to know that God was behind all these things that I wanted and got, you know.
What advice can you give to the next generation of our family?
Put God first, listen to what He says, and then the second people that you listen to are the parents. Because my parents never gave me any bad advice. All the advice that I received from the parents, it was all good advice. And sometimes you may think, well, the parents are giving this advice here, but I think I'll try this. Well, if it works out, fine. If it doesn't, I would say listen to the parents, because I've never had any advice from the parents that I either didn't like or didn't, or maybe the situation didn't work itself out. So a lot of people have said you have lived a charmed life, but I don't think so. I know that it was God behind me and protecting me and giving me all of those positions that I had while I was still in charge of this and that. And so as time goes on, I will be in my 90s, not too far from now. So God has blessed me. God bless all of you Fords.